Evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, and this is your closing comment. It's video number 330. And as I always remind you, if you like the work, please subscribe. Today was kind of an interesting day. We started off with the CPI numbers. We were up 0.6%. That was slightly higher than the estimate of 0.5. Core CPI was up 0.2%, and that was pretty much in line with what was expectations. I don't know. All of the commentators talk about subdued inflation, and I guess my question is, do any of these people ever go to a grocery store? Because there, the inflation is obvious. In any event, the Dow started off a little on the soft side. It didn't last very long, and at the end of the day, we finished up 566, NASDAQ up 98, the S&P up 42, the Russell up 25, and even the transports up 159. Internals were 5-3 on the NASDAQ and 2-1 on the NYSE. Volume was a little lighter than yesterday, but yesterday we had that big reversal that we saw very little. We saw no follow through on the Dow stocks, and we saw only limited follow through this morning early on the NASDAQ stocks. As far as the sectors go, energy was up. The strongest were energy, industrials, materials, and healthcare. The biggest weaker ones were consumer discretionary and financials. I'll come back to the financials in a second. On the Dow Jones, we were 30 up. The biggest gainers there were United Health, UNH, adding 60 Dow points, Home Depot making a new high towards the end of the day, up 55 Dow points, Apple and Caterpillar also adding 43, McDonald's adding 39, and a trio of Travelers, Boeing, and Visa all adding 30. The reason that I mentioned the financials is because the numbers looked pretty good for JP Morgan this morning. The issue, though, turned out to be while they beat revenues and earnings numbers, they also increased their loan loss provisions 875% from 1.2 billion up to 10.5 billion. And the stock, which traded 102.5 in the extended hours pre-market, never got above 99 and change and closed up an anemic 56 cents. Citi down $2.50 or 3.9, and Wells Fargo down $1.16, 4.6%. And the CFO was on CNBC today trying to put some lipstick on this pig of a company. And unfortunately, Wells Fargo's main business is mortgages. And as you know, mortgage business is soft, not for new mortgages, but for people who have mortgages, who are unemployed and are getting deferrals and accommodations by Wells Fargo, and that certainly doesn't help. It, of course, also doesn't help that rates are so low that the margins are really tight. The other thing about Wells Fargo, I heard an analyst talking today about a discount to tangible book. According to Wells, their tangible book is about $31, and the stock sells for 24 and change. As I said a couple of years ago, I don't know how you can possibly know what your tangible book is if you don't have any idea what your mortgage forfeitures and carrying those properties on your books, especially coming into the winter season where you have to heat those too, would actually be. So I'm not really so sure that their tangible book is even knowable at this point. Um, One financial that missed both top and bottom line was Travelers, but this one acted a whole lot better. They said that their losses were mostly from catastrophic events and civil unrest, and the stock closed 118.55, up $4.31 or 3.8%. The chart here, I think, is one of the most important charts that we can look at these days. Excuse me. It's the US dollar. The market can get a lot of headline risk. It can also get a lot of positive response. But the one thing that it can't be is really manipulated. So it's a big market, and it's one of the most important markets in that if you really want to know how a country is doing, you really just need to look at its currency. And this one looks bad. As you can see, I drew this little line here for support. I don't know how it got moved, but as you can see, we broke down here and rallied back up to the line. And since we've had a crossover of the 5-day through the 20, and we've had a cross down of the 50 through the 100-day. We have some support down here at 96, and then again at about 95 and a quarter. But I really don't see this holding. The result of this is the fact that we have oil prices moving higher, we have gold prices moving to recovery highs, we have silver moving to recovery highs, and anything that is world consumed, international commodities, are really tough relative to the dollar. You just don't get gold moving up unless you have some weakness in the dollar. Anyway, late in the day after the close, Moderna reported that they have the results of their full phase 1 trial of their antigen vaccine. And as it turns out, those 45 patients, rather than just giving the top line numbers, which when they did a couple of weeks ago, the stock went up 20% that day. The bottom line here is that the patients who were given their antigen produced twice as much versus even people who had already had and recovered from COVID-19. So that's a pretty stunning number, and it gives a lot of hope to the idea that between Moderna and the combination of Pfizer and BNTX could possibly have a vaccine before year end. Moderna was up during the day. It closed at 75.04, up 326 or 4.5%. But since this announcement, it has traded as high as 89.67, and the stock is a shade over 87 right now, which is up 12 or an additional 14% on top of what it did during the day. Well, that's about it. We have on a couple of good trades in the gold and silver. We added to the GLD today, and we also added a small position in Raytheon Technologies. Tomorrow morning, we have earnings coming from UNH and Goldman. So we'll see how Goldman does. I would expect that with their trading desk and the volatility that we had, that those numbers will look very strong. It's just a matter of how much of that is already in the market. Okay, everyone, have a good evening, and I'll be back first thing in the morning.